Training programs for employees are obviously something that we all need. It's something that we need to onboard employees. It's something that we need to get employees up to speed with how the company operates, maybe with how your software operates. And if you're in any sort of technical position, you really need to know how to approach technical things, troubleshooting. Having the training put in place is the best and in many ways the only way you can accomplish that. There are many great ways to approach employee training. I don't have all the answers in what training program works best because every training should be individualized to what you're doing, to the industry. If you have an industry that's a very niche industry, the kind of industry that you only touch if you've worked in the industry before, you'll probably want to start your training with what does our industry do? What does the industry that we serve do? Maybe this person isn't actually going to be doing anything in that industry. Maybe your company works with that industry, but you're hiring someone into a back-end role like an HR or an IT type role, and they're not going to be interacting with the customers of your company. If it were me and I was coming into something that was very niche like that, I would still want to understand what the company's doing, primarily because I want to be able to explain to people what I do, where I work, and what the company I work for does. It's very important that your employees right from the beginning understand what your company does. And most of the times they do. Most of the times they at least understand the market and at least a part of what the company does. But that doesn't necessarily mean they understand the industry or why the need for your company, your product exists. One of the first things you should always cover in training is what is it we do and why do we do it? You don't ever want to bring an employee into an organization and say the why we do something is for profit. Profit is not your why. Profit is a result. The why should be to help people, to provide them solutions, to create a better environment for that market, that industry. Getting your employees onboarded in a way that shows them this is why we do what we do. Almost every mission statement I have read, we exist to serve our customers and further provide a product to make their lives easier. That's a great mission, but it doesn't tell me anything about what your product is or why you need to exist in the first place. I think it's safe to say that there's a lot of training programs out there that are very one note. I've been through great training programs. I've been through some that aren't so great. I've been in training programs where I have literally sat at a computer for 60 hours probably in total watching videos. That might work for some people. It doesn't always work for me. It was informational, and sometimes it's the only way you can do it, especially if you're looking at something really technical. Maybe your company is making this software and you're the only company that does that. They're not going to be able to pick up this information any other way besides you just showing them the software and what it does and then explaining why it does it. So if you are having your employees sit in front of a video, try to break that up a little bit if at all possible. Implement a end of day recap. Here's the videos that you're going to go through today. You're going to go through this video quiz that we've put together, then you're going to go through this video and then another knowledge check, and then at the end of the day we're going to sit down and talk through those videos and see if there's any questions that you had that come up. Maybe we can look at your knowledge check, see how you did. Let's go back and review different things. That doesn't mean going through everything that they just did and reading to them what they just watched in the video. You're wasting your trainer's time and you're wasting your employees' time at that point. If your trainers have trained or onboarded for any length of time, chances are they know the questions that come up. If you are an onboarder, if you are a trainer, if you're implementing this sort of program, you'll probably know the types of questions that most employees who come in have at certain points of the process. I've seen a lot of times where the trainers say, yep, that's always a question at this point, and they bring it up naturally. But I've also seen a lot of times where the trainers are answering this question and they answer it every single time, and it almost catches them by surprise every single time. You know the questions that most people ask. Why aren't you just writing that question into your training material at that point? Many times in training, we are afraid to ask questions. Trainers are afraid to ask questions. Trainees are afraid to ask questions. We encourage our trainees to ask questions, but our trainees might not know what to ask or how to ask it or even what question they should be asking at that point. And sometimes we need to find ways to guide them to those questions. Because I've worked in the technical industry for so long and working with IT, I'm telling people constantly, ask questions. You shouldn't be the smartest person in the room. You will never be the smartest person in the room. I never want to be the smartest person in the room because I want to raise up my employees to, when it comes to technical things, I want them to be smarter than me. That's the mark of a good leader, is being able to develop employees from not knowing anything to now they're the subject matter expert that I can go to when I have a question about that thing. But they won't get there if they don't ask the questions and they don't know who to ask the questions to or how the questions are asked. If I get asked a question that I don't know, I try to find the answer for them. I don't know why it works that way, but I know someone who might, so let's go together and talk to him. When you're in a management role, you're not in the day-to-day, you're not doing the day-to-day things, and so you've started losing some of that nitty-gritty day-to-day technical detail. You might not be the person to have the answer to those questions, and that is okay. When I've onboarded employees, I've done it in groups, I've done it one-on-one. I think one-on-one works really well because you have someone they feel very free to ask questions as they come. When I work with a group, this employee has this question, this employee has the exact same question, this employee didn't really know how to phrase it or didn't know if everyone else in the room knew it and they didn't want to look stupid, so they're not asking it. So this employee asked the question and now both those employees know. In order to get your employees and your trainers to the point of asking questions, you have to encourage vulnerability and you have to be willing to be vulnerable yourself, because you can't really encourage your employees to be vulnerable if you're not willing to be vulnerable. Hey, when I was doing this and I came to this point in the training, I literally had no idea what this meant. Do you guys have any questions on this? Can I help you maybe understand this a little more, because this is a difficult concept. If you are a trainee and you don't know how to ask the question yet, or what the question you want to ask is, be open, be honest, be transparent about that. If you have a good mentor, if you have a good trainer, if you have a good leader, this shouldn't be a problem. But also make sure you're asking that question when you have it. I've seen this before where I have an agent come in, they go through training, we have a very basic process. For example, connecting a computer to the wireless network and some of the basic troubleshooting steps with that. This might be something that we deal with hundreds, if not thousands of times in the course of a year. When we train this process, might be agents who go through that and they would miss certain things and they would be too afraid to ask the question because they saw other people understanding it around them. There are no stupid questions. You aren't stupid for asking a question. But if you have a question and you don't ask it because you're embarrassed to ask it, or you don't ask it because you think other people don't have the same question as you, and you get into the job and every time that instance comes up, you kind of end up passing it or stepping around it, or I'm just not going to deal with that because I don't know it, and now I don't want to ask about it because now I've been here for 6 months or 8 months or 12 months. There aren't any stupid questions. But you might be stupid if you don't ask. The question was never stupid. The question isn't stupid whether you ask it at the beginning or 2 years in. The question's still not stupid. But the person who didn't ask the question ends up looking worse later. You don't know how to do that? We ask you, did you have questions? This is a basic thing. I have watched many employees get to that point, even sometimes a couple years in, and ask these questions or say, I don't know how to do that. It's very frustrating, especially as a manager or a leader or a trainer. It can be very frustrating because sometimes that comes back on you. I gave you all the information you needed to be successful at your job and you didn't take advantage of it. That's frustrating to me. I poured time and effort into you and all your coworkers at the exact same time, and I encourage you to ask questions, and you didn't ask the question, what did I do wrong? Make sure you're asking those questions. You're going to find out early on if people aren't receptive to questions. They should be receptive to questions. And if people aren't receptive to questions and you're getting pushback from people who have been there a long time, take it to your manager. Let your manager know, because that's not acceptable for people who should be training or mentoring to not be able to answer your question. When you're in an industry where we have documentation that you can rely on, and you have mentors who are trying to encourage these new employees, sometimes those mentors, because they have been here so long, sometimes they forget how they should be answering the question. And they either give the answer without telling them how to find the answer, or They assume that the reason this person is asking the question is because they don't want to learn how to find the answer, which is also dangerous. How do I find this thing? Well, did you read the documentation? That is a guide, but that's not an answer. And every single time if this employee asks, I'm having this issue, can someone tell me how to work through it? The answer should be, well, there is documentation for that. Have you looked at the knowledge article for that? That should be the first question that the mentor asks. Yes, I've looked through it. I'm not understanding this piece. Can you help me understand it? That's a really good dialogue, and this person is helping that person work through, figure out how to find that answer. It's not appropriate when this person says, hey, how do I find this answer? Look at the documentation. I already looked at the documentation. Look at it again. You're not helping them find the answer. They've told you, I've done what I've expected to do. I've looked at my resources. I still can't find the answer. I'm not understanding something. I have made myself vulnerable to the point of asking this question. Please just help me answer this question. And now I feel like I can't be vulnerable because all I'm getting is pushback, and I'm hitting a wall with people who don't want to answer a question. I've had to teach trainees many times how to approach individuals, certain people, but also just generally how to ask a question. Hey guys, I have a question on this. I remember something about this. I've read this piece of documentation and it said this and this and this, but I'm not fully understanding it. Is there something else I'm missing? Can you point me in the right direction? This science to asking a question in the way of, I have a question, this is what I've tried already, this is what I was going to try, what are my next steps? Can you please help me get there? Even the most technical person who really doesn't enjoy asking questions should be able to appreciate that person is showing they've already done their due diligence. They've already used their resources to try to find the answer. Something's not clicking, so we need to figure out what that is to be able to get them to their answer. So hopefully the next time they have this question, they can take those steps without having to ask for help. It is very important to encourage vulnerability for both you and your employees early on. I think sometimes people look at vulnerability and they're just like, well, if you show weakness, you're weak. You don't want to show that you don't know something. Vulnerability takes courage because you have to say, I don't know something, I need help. There's a lot of personality types that don't want to show any sort of weakness. They don't want to show they don't know something. So sometimes they over-explain, or they just pretend to know the answer because to them showing vulnerability is weakness. I've worked with many people with that personality. I've managed people with that personality, and sometimes encouraging that vulnerability is all you can do. If you don't ask this question now, if you have this question and you don't ask it now, I'm not going to be upset. I will not be upset if you ask this question now. I don't expect you to know the answer right now. In 3 months, if you ask this question, I'm going to be a little upset because by then you should know the answer to this, or you should know how to find the answer. So you shouldn't be coming to me to help you understand how to find the answer. I don't expect my employees to have the answer to every question all the time, but I do expect my employees to know where to go to find the answer to the questions. I'm not going to have the answer to every single question that you come to me with every time, but I will do my best to find the answer. Because if I don't know and I tell the person, go figure it out yourself, if I'm not willing to be vulnerable and tell them that I don't know the answer to, then I'm failing as a leader. Showing you can take feedback and receive feedback, especially early on, can help fight toxicity and cynicism later. You can fight defensiveness by asking the question, what is it you see? Also, a really good way to encourage people to find their answers. Instead of saying, why don't you know the answer to this? Well, what is it you see? What is it you're looking at? I have instructed people how to ask questions to mentors. I've instructed mentors how to ask questions to people who are asking questions. What are the resources you've looked at so far? Did you read the bottom part of the knowledge article? Because it's in there. There's ways to guide people to that without sounding condescending and without creating defensiveness. As a manager and as an employee, you want to show that you can take and receive feedback. I've seen more employees than not ask for feedback that I don't even have to give them. They want to see all of their feedback from customers, and maybe I don't even have access to the feedback from customers, or maybe our customers legitimately aren't just sending feedback. Many times in the service industry, we only get negative feedback, or we'll get feedback without comments. So someone will get a support ticket finished, and they'll get that feedback email and they'll go in and click 5 stars all the way through and submit it and they're done. Or they'll go through and they'll click 1 star because They didn't like that they had to call in the first place. That doesn't necessarily reflect on the agent's performance. Whenever I see feedback, whenever I'm actually able to see the feedback that was written, I provide that to my agents. I have never had an agent not want to see their direct customer feedback. I have had many times where the customer feedback hasn't been available to me, and I've been asked for customer feedback repeatedly. Hey, can I see the feedback that the customers are sending me? I wish, because I would love to see that feedback. I would love to provide it to you, positive or negative, because in customer service, in IT, in whatever you're doing, your purpose is to serve the customer. So the feedback you're getting from management just based on your stats, it's probably not the thing that drives you if you got into customer service in the first place. The people who work in customer service are often driven by the desire to help people. Those goals are numbers. Help your employees meet what they're driven by and make sure they're seeing the feedback they get from people. If they worked with a customer on the phone for 20 minutes, they want to see the fruits of their labor. Not just hey, you did a good job on a ticket, I guess, because it's resolved. They want to know that the customer felt like they provided good customer service. Feedback is very important. I'm not a huge fan of scripts where agents ask for the person to provide feedback, but sometimes it can be very helpful, especially if you're not receiving feedback. I'm going to send you a survey at the end of this. We really appreciate if you fill that out. It's really helpful for us because that goes to someone who can affect change. It doesn't just come back to me. Encourage vulnerability for both yourself and your employees early on in your relationship with those employees. Vulnerability takes a lot of courage because it's uncomfortable. Brené Brown defines vulnerability as the emotion we experience when there is uncertainty, risk, and/or emotional exposure. Vulnerability takes courage because you have to work through very uncomfortable emotions, especially if you are the kind of person who's a perfectionist and you don't like to be wrong, you don't like to have to ask questions. Being vulnerable can be a struggle. That's why it's important to not shoot someone down when they bring themselves to the level of vulnerability where they come and ask a question that they think might be a stupid question. They've already got to that point of vulnerability. They're not being defensive. And anything you can do to fight defensiveness will help you later fight toxicity, fight cynicism. You need to be open, and you need to encourage your mentors to also be open and not get burnt out by asking or answering the exact same questions over and over and over. Courage is contagious. To build daring leadership, build courage in our teams, we have to cultivate an environment where courage and vulnerability is expected. And the best place to do that is right away in training when you're simply just encouraging people to ask questions. By encouraging people to ask questions, you're encouraging vulnerability, you're encouraging levels of courage, and you will create that environment. Hey guys, I just am having a blank today. I know I should know the answer to this question. I just don't. Can anyone help? Yeah, no problem. I will make sure I help you with that issue. When your employees understand what it means for the other employee to be vulnerable and courageous, to step out and ask those questions, then your teams, not only are they going to be better at asking questions, but they're going to be better together. When this person has a question, they're not going to be as afraid to ask, and maybe that person will be able to answer their questions. I have watched many times the dynamic of trainees outpace the trainer in a few months, where all of a sudden the trainer is asking the trainee because that trainee latched onto something and went with it and got really good at that thing that trainer knew about, but they didn't go as deep because it might not have been something that was as interesting. When that happens, you create a culture of people who know more and are able to help each other. They're sharing knowledge. Typically, in this sort of industry and customer service, your product isn't the thing you're selling. Your product is knowledge. Knowledge for your employees, knowledge sharing, and if you're doing self-service, eventually knowledge that you could give to the customers so they are able to help themselves without even calling you. But none of that comes if you haven't encouraged vulnerability first and built that into your training and encouraged asking questions early on. Hope you found this informative. I hope it was interesting and maybe a different perspective. Please like this video, subscribe so you continue to see more of my videos, and comment below if you want to continue the conversation. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. What are times that you have seen a question asked that just was not asked in a great way, and how did you get those people to ask the question in a better way? Or maybe you had someone who was always asking a question and you thought they were a lost cause, and it turns out they just didn't understand because they didn't have a really good trainer. Maybe the trainer wasn't as open with them, so they stopped asking questions. Are there things that you've seen that have worked in your organization, or things that you think might be interesting to try? Let's continue the conversation. Thank you for watching.